Okay, let's be real for a sec. We've all been there, right? That big project's just hanging over your head, the one you should be doing. But suddenly, cleaning the fridge seems super important.
Right.
It's that procrastination monster we all struggle with. So today we're diving deep into Tim Urban's blog post, How to Beat Procrastination. Specifically, part two.
Yeah.
We'll unpack it and hopefully give you some actual tactics you can use. Because Urban is pretty funny, but also insightful about this whole thing.
Oh, absolutely. And what I find really interesting about his approach is that he doesn't just give surface level advice. He digs into the psychology behind why we procrastinate.
Yeah, he really paints a picture of what's happening inside the procrastinator's mind. It's
Yeah.
like a whole play up there. Speaking of characters, we got to talk about this instant gratification monkey, the IGM. So what is this little guy, and why does he seem to have all the control?
Well, the instant gratification monkey, that's, the impulsive side of us all, the part that just wants to feel good right now. Now that you avoid anything hard or boring.
Yeah.
Like, hey, why work on that presentation when you could watch that new show on Netflix?
Oh, tell me about it. My IGM has a VIP pass to my Netflix account and like the lifetime supply of snacks. But if the monkey's the one in charge, who's supposed to be the responsible one? Is there anyone trying to keep us on track?
There is. Urban calls him the rational decision maker, the voice of reason. He's all about deadlines, goals, consequences. But as I'm sure you know, the monkey often wins that battle. And, well, that's what leads to what Urban calls the procrastinator's storyline.
Okay, the storyline. That sounds interesting. We all have stories we tell ourselves. But what is it about this one specifically that makes us procrastinate?
Think of it like the script you have in your head about yourself and what you're capable of, especially when it comes to getting things done. Procrastinators. Well, their storyline is filled with things like, I'm just bad at finishing stuff, or I work best under pressure, even though that pressure is like a monster sitting on your chest. The thing is, these stories, they might not even be true, but they become self-fulfilling prophecies. They chip away at your confidence before you even begin.
I can see how that would make any task, even small ones, feel impossible. It's like you're setting yourself up to fail before you even start. But Urban says you can rewrite the storyline, right? How do we do that? How do we change that script?
It's not about just like positive affirmations or telling yourself a different story. It's more about concrete actions, actions that go against that old narrative. It's about proving to yourself through your behavior that you can do more than your storyline says. Think of it like gathering evidence for a new, more empowering story.
Got it. Action over affirmations. I like that. But where does that action start? Probably not diving headfirst into that massive task, I'm guessing.
You're right. No one climbs Everest in one leap. Urban breaks it down into two main parts, planning and doing. And funnily enough, procrastinators are usually great at planning.
Oh, totally. It feels productive, like you're making progress, but really it's just another form of procrastination, isn't it?
Exactly. The trap of being busy but not actually achieving anything. Procrastinators can make these elaborate plans, but they end up setting themselves up for failure.
Okay, that's fascinating. So what's different about a procrastinator's plan compared to one that actually leads to, getting things done?
Well, procrastinators tend to make these hugely vague to-do lists, like every single thing they've ever wanted to do all on one list. Urban calls it a doer's nightmare. And I think we've all felt that sense of overwhelm when facing a to-do list a mile long.
Ugh, yes. And my IGM. That list is like his personal playground, an excuse to get distracted and do anything but what's actually on it.
Exactly. Vague lists give the monkey too much wiggle room. So the big question is, how do we fight that? What does effective planning look like? What does Urban suggest?
I am so ready to ditch my mile-long to-do list for something that actually works. Where do we even begin?
So we were talking about the difference between planning that sets you up for failure versus planning that actually helps you get stuff done.
Yeah, I'm ready to ditch my usual get overwhelmed and do nothing routine and actually try a more effective way to plan. So what does that look like? What's the first step?
Well, Urban suggests starting with something pretty simple, actually. Ruthless prioritization. Instead of that giant to-do list, pick one winner from all your tasks.
Okay, pick one winner. Sounds good. But what about all the other stuff? The things that are also kind of screaming for attention. How do you choose just one when everything feels important?
It really comes down to aligning your actions with, well, your values and goals.
Yeah.
Think about it. Which task, if you actually finished it, would make the biggest positive impact on your life right now? What would make you feel the most, I don't know, accomplished, satisfied, that's your winner. Of course, sometimes urgent things pop up, but the goal is to get those out of the way quickly so you can get back to, what really matters for you.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. But let's say I've picked my winner and it's still this massive, daunting thing. It's like back to that mountain analogy, standing at the bottom and feeling totally overwhelmed.
Right. Urban has a great word for those big, vague goals. He calls them icky.
Mm-hmm.
They're murky, they're intimidating, and you don't even know where to start. And when a task feels icky, that's when the IGM, that instant gratification monkey, really throws a fit.
Oh, the icky feeling. I know it well. It's like my IGM has a sixth sense for icky, goes into overdrive whenever there's something challenging. So how do you un-icky something? How do you make it less daunting?
The key is to break it down into smaller, more concrete steps. So instead of learn to code, it becomes research online courses. Then gather the software I need, then schedule 30 minutes to actually practice. It's taking that big, scary goal and turning it into a roadmap, step by step.
I see. So you shift the focus from the big, overwhelming end result to those smaller, more doable actions. But even with a detailed roadmap, it's still easy to get lost, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that's why Urban brings in this really great analogy. Building a house. You don't build a house all at once, right? You lay one brick at a time. And it's the same with any big project, whether it's writing a book or launching a business, whatever. It can be broken down into those manageable units of progress, those bricks.
I love that. It makes those big goals feel so much more attainable. Okay, so we've un-ickied the task, broken it down into bricks. Now what? How do we actually start laying those bricks?
This is the final stage of effective planning, according to Urban. It's about creating what he calls a brick timeline.
A brick timeline. Okay, I'm listening. Tell me more.
It's basically scheduling those bricks into your calendar. Like setting aside specific, non-negotiable time to work on your project. It's taking those good intentions and turning them into concrete actions. No more, oh, I'll get to it someday.
It's like you have a train to catch, a specific time to depart for your goal, no missing it. So the key to effective planning, according to Urban, is to pick one winner, break it down into those manageable bricks, and then actually schedule them into a brick timeline. That sounds so much better than my usual fly-by-the-seat-of-my-pants chaos. But, okay, even as we're talking, I can feel that little voice in my head starting to pipe up. Even with the solid plan, the moment I actually have to do the work, the resistance kicks in. It's like a reflex.
You're hitting on a really important point. And Urban doesn't shy away from it. He knows that even with the best plan, actually doing the work is where most procrastinators get stuck.
It's like we're all dressed up, ready to go to the party, but then we just freeze at the door. What's happening in our minds at that point? Why is it so hard to go from planning to actually doing?
Well, Urban uses this really helpful visual metaphor to explain it, one that I think you'll connect with. He talks about the critical entrance, the dark woods, the happy playground, and the dark playground. It's like we're navigating a mental landscape with different paths and destinations, almost like we're on a quest or something.
Okay, I'm picturing a map in my head with winding paths and mysterious places. Walk me through this mental landscape. What does each of these places represent?
Okay, so the critical entrance, picture that as the moment when you actually commit to starting the task. Closing those tempting browser tabs, silencing your phone, and actually opening that document or putting on your running shoes. Whatever it is.
Oh, I can feel it. That entrance can be scary, like stepping into a dark, unknown forest.
Exactly. And that's where the dark woods come in. They represent the actual doing of the work. The part that can be uncomfortable, challenging, and sometimes, let's be honest, just not fun.
And right outside those dark woods, there's a more tempting path, right? The dark playground you mentioned.
Ah, yes. The dark playground. That's the land of distractions, endless scrolling, binge watching, basically anything that keeps you from facing the work. It's dark because, sure, it feels good in the moment, but ultimately you just end up feeling drained and even more stressed.
I think my IGM has like a platinum membership to the dark playground. It's his happy place. But you also mentioned a different destination, right? One that sounds much better, the happy playground.
Yes, that's the reward for pushing through the dark woods and actually finishing the task. It's the feeling of accomplishment, satisfaction, and sometimes, if you're lucky and really engaged in the work, you even reach this state of flow.
Flow, I hear that word a lot. What does it actually mean in this context?
Flow is that feeling of being totally absorbed in what you're doing. Like you lose track of time, you're completely focused and immersed in the task, almost like a creative trance. And it's often when we do our best work, the work that feels the most rewarding.
Okay, so we have this map of the procrastinator's mind, but how does it actually help us beat procrastination? It all sounds a bit, I don't know, theoretical.
It's not just theory, actually. What Urban's describing are very real scenarios that I think many of us experience. Like, there's the procrastinator who never even enters that critical entrance. They're stuck in the dark playground, paralyzed by anxiety, but never actually starting.
Oh, that's me sometimes. It's like being stuck in the waiting room of my own goals. All the anxiety, none of the action.
Right. Then there's the procrastinator who does enter the dark woods, but keeps getting pulled back to the dark playground. They make some progress, but never quite reach that crucial tipping point.
Tipping point. Now,
Yeah.
that's a term I got to hear more about. What is it, and why is it so important here?
The tipping point is like that magical moment when you've pushed through enough of the dark woods that you can see the end in sight. Suddenly, both you and D, the IGM, are actually motivated to reach the happy playground.
It's like you've climbed the mountain, and now it's all downhill from there. Reaching that tipping point sounds crucial. But how do we even get there when the RGM is constantly pulling us back to that, siren song of the God playground?
And that's where Urban's insights into how to actually outsmart the monkey at each stage become really valuable. And that's where the rubber meets the road, right? Where we go from, understanding the problem to actually doing something about it.
Urban gives us some pretty good strategies for outsmarting that monkey at each stage.
Okay, I'm ready. Give me the monkey wrangling secrets. What are they? Where do we start?
Well, the first hurdle, right? It's forcing that monkey through the critical
Yeah.
entrance. That can feel like the hardest part, I know. The initial commitment to close all those distractions, to put your phone down, and actually start the task.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes just opening the document,
Yeah.
that feels impossible. Any tips for making that first step less painful?
This is where having a plan, like an actual set plan, can really help. That brick timeline we talked about. When you have that roadmap with specific times to work on your project, the monkey can't argue as much.
It's like you've made an appointment with your goals.
Can't just skip it, even if the IGM is throwing a tantrum. Okay, so let's say we've managed to drag the monkey through the critical entrance. We're in the dark woods now. What happens then?
That's where the real work begins.
Yeah.
And the monkey. He's not giving up that easily. He's going to tempt you with all those distractions in the dark playground, especially when the task gets, a little bit tough.
Ooh, I can feel those little monkey claws digging in already. But Urban says that as we move through the dark woods, something changes inside us, right? What is it? What shifts?
Well, as you start making progress, you naturally start to feel good about it. Even if it's just finishing one small brick, it boosts your self-esteem, even a little bit.
So making progress is like the cure for procrastination.
Well, it's a big part of it, for sure. And as your self-esteem grows, the monkey actually starts to lose some of its power. Urban even talks about this high self-esteem banana that appears, distracting the monkey from his usual tricks.
That's awesome. So it's like the monkey gets distracted by his own reflection in the mirror of our accomplishment. And if we keep going, we hit that tipping point. But is it smooth sailing from there? Or are there still challenges?
Not always smooth sailing, no. You might still hit some roadblocks, still feel that urge to procrastinate,
Right.
but the goal isn't to be perfect. It's to keep going, to acknowledge that the monkey's always going to be there whispering in your ear, but to choose to move forward anyway.
So it's all about willpower then.
Not entirely. Remember, we're trying to rewrite that storyline, that negative script in our heads, and that happens through consistent action, not just willpower in the moment. The more you prove to yourself that you can overcome procrastination, the weaker the monkey's grip on you becomes.
It's like building a track record of success, one brick at a time. So besides willpower, are there any practical things we can do to outsmart the monkey, especially when he's really persistent?
We've touched on a few, like that brick timeline, minimizing distractions.
Yeah.
But Urban has other tips too. One is to get some external support. Like, tell a friend or a family member about your goal, ask them to hold you accountable.
Oh, that's good. Having that support system really does make a difference.
Yeah.
It's like having a cheerleader in your corner, reminding you what you're working towards. Anything else?
He also talks about creating a panic monster, which is basically a self-imposed deadline to inject a little, healthy fear.
The panic monster. I know him well. Sometimes that little bit of fear is all you need to get moving. What else? Any other monkey wrangling tools?
Visual reminders are good too. Post-it notes, alarms, anything that keeps your goal top of mind.
Yeah.
And I think most importantly, it's customizing those strategies. What works for one person might not work for another. It's about experimenting and finding what helps you stay focused, what keeps you motivated.
Right. It's about creating a system that supports your goals. Because willpower alone isn't always enough. But even with all these strategies and tools, Urban makes it clear that it's about gradual progress, not like overnight perfection.
Absolutely. Remember that house building analogy
Right.
that applies here too. Every time you resist that monkey, every time you choose progress, you're laying another brick in the foundation of, well, a more productive, more fulfilling life.
I love that image. Makes it feel a lot less overwhelming and a lot more hopeful.
It is hopeful.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's so great about Urban's approach. He doesn't offer those quick fixes or make promises that aren't realistic. He gives you a framework, a way to understand and actually overcome this thing that so many of us struggle with.
It really has been a fascinating deep dive. And as we wrap up, is there any final thought, any key takeaway you want to leave our listener with?
I think Urban himself says it best. He says that beating procrastination is about taking control of your own life. It's about recognizing that you have the power to choose your actions, to shape your own future. It's not always easy, but it's a fight worth fighting. And remember, you can always come back and re-listen to this deep dive, anytime you need a reminder of the tools and strategies you have.
Well said. Now, I'm curious, what's one brick you can lay today to start moving towards a goal you've been putting off? What choice can you make right now to start rewriting your own storyline? We're rooting for you. Until next time, happy bricklaying.